Hello, my name is Yasmina and I'm representing Team D along with my teammates Juliette, Louise, Ferdinand, Christina, Maher and Sofia. We are delighted to present to you our Omnichannel distribution project. We have chosen to compare and contrast the restaurant and furniture sectors in Singapore and Morocco. We hope you will learn a lot. Let's dive right into it. So what's on the agenda today? We will begin with an introduction and overview of Morocco, followed by Singapore, then comparing both countries on the base of restaurant and furniture industries. Finally, we will give recommendations for both sectors and both countries. Morocco is a country in Northwest Africa and an emerging economy. You can see some numbers in the brown box regarding its population, surface area, and GDP. It is important to note that the economy relies mainly on the export of raw materials, as well as the growing tourism and telecommunications sectors. The government has also created several privatization policies in order to encourage local production.
Here are some fun facts about the retail industry. The retail industry is 12% of Morocco's GDP. Morocco is the fifth most technologically advanced country in Africa. There is a rise in urbanization and rising household consumption, which has been beneficial for the industry in recent years. There are also new upcoming trends in the market. It is important to note that in Morocco, there are more than 900 souks or local markets, so the industry is much more traditional. Regarding the industry during COVID, all services that were not of first necessity, such as restaurant and furniture provider, were asked to close completely. Once restrictions were lifted, establishments like restaurants could only operate on food delivery and takeaway services, but not all companies had the infrastructure to do so. COVID has been extremely difficult for restaurants as they had a 50% to 60% turnover lost due to COVID regulations. 40% of businesses had to close during hard lockdown and 1.2 million people have been laid off. However, the positive effect is that there were an increase in food delivery. Regarding the furniture sector, the handcraft sector employs 2.3 million people, accounts for 7% of the GDP, 85% of retail is traditional small scale, and the informal market accounts for 80% of the furniture industry.
Over here, we can see Morocco's COVID timeline. In March, the first cases were confirmed, all the flights were suspended, and Morocco was in full lockdown. In April, the first field hospital was built, the payments were postponed, and mandatory masks were imposed. In May, some markets reopened, and mass COVID-19 testing began. The deconfinement of Phase 1 started, and in June, deconfinement of Phase 2 began. The domestic flights resumed as well in June. In December, lockdown measures from December 22nd and January 10th were reinforced, and today there are several different measures that have been put in place to avoid the propagation of COVID-19.
Facts about Morocco and how it dealt with COVID. The country had strict lockdown measures and immediately closed the borders for travelers and residents. Masks were compulsory. The territory was divided into Zone 1 and Zone 2 in order to minimize the spread, giving different restrictions per zone according to cases. There is weak health in Morocco and poor unemployment insurance. 50% of Moroccan households live in the informal sector, and 3 billion euros were released to combat the economic effects of the pandemic.
McDonald's in Morocco suspended all its food services, including its drive-through and home deliveries in March due to the government regulation. In order to resume their activities, McDonald's had to comply with the Tahsin certification guidelines. The aim of the certificate is to ensure sanitation and hygiene in businesses. These guidelines include access to the establishment disinfection, establishment rules, transportation and prevention. McDonald's was the first company in Morocco to have the Tahsin certificates for all their shops. On top of that, Morocco launched Mtahdin, meaning United, a free meal initiative for those most in need, as an act of solidarity with national efforts to mitigate repercussions of the COVID-19 outbreak. The Mtahdin initiative covered the geographic scope of 19 Moroccan cities. This has made McDonald's very popular amongst Moroccan citizens who really appreciated the company's solidarity.
Jumia is the #1 marketplace in Africa. Jumia has 3 main platforms: Jumia.mi, Jumia Services, and Jumia Pay. The internet penetration in Africa was making Jumia very profitable in the pre-COVID years. In fact, the company experienced a peak in their revenues in 2018. However, COVID has made them much more successful. Despite the still common fear of Morocco citizens to use e-commerce platforms for online sales, the hard lockdown measures and common fear of COVID have made people overlook their financial uncertainty on behalf of their own health, making Jumia's turnover to peak. They experienced a 54% growth, they received more than 15 million visits a month, and they now operate in 97% of Morocco. In addition to the increasing visits to their site, Jumia has also gained new vendors and suppliers during COVID. Once hard restrictions were lifted, they partnered with other local restaurants to provide food delivery services on their behalf for those companies that did not have the infrastructure to provide food delivery or takeaway. Jumia Pay was the most developed platform during COVID. Electronic payment and contactless deliveries became very popular amongst consumers to avoid virus infection.
Moving on to the furniture industry, Yasmina in our team is Moroccan and went back to Morocco this weekend to be able to interview various local furniture retailers who work in the markets. She interviewed Mr. Hamid Ha, a local vendor who was kind enough to answer her questions, including how COVID affected his business, what they plan on changing in the way they do business, and many more questions. You will find the entire video at the end of this video as an appendix. Looking at larger chains, Kitea is the leader of DIY furniture in Morocco. All stores closed during the hard lockdown, but the company decided to launch their website for the first time during the pandemic. They had some online orders, but the reopening was successful as they made the same revenue in the month of June 2020 as June 2019. However, the chain had an overall negative 2020 revenue and a decrease of 20% year-on-year. The chain also plans on opening smaller stores in the country in the years to come. The head of Kitea Morocco mentioned in an interview that the furniture sector has not yet matured in Morocco. It is far from being saturated, so it is worth the investment. Now let's move on to Singapore. Singapore is a city-state in Southeast Asia. You can see here above various numbers about the country such as population, surface area, and GDP. It is one of Asia's wealthiest economic hubs. The key pillars of its economic growth are tourism, manufacturing, and the financial sector. Singapore's economy has had a recent slowdown in growth in 2019, the slowest growth in a decade. The slowdown in the economy was due to the decline of the manufacturing sector. It is important to note that Singapore is known for its conservative culture and strict laws. The city-state is one of the most stable and secure in the world, which helped it deal with COVID in a very organized way.
The retail sector is worth 83.2 billion Singapore dollars that keeps on increasing year on year. It currently represents 22% of the GDP. Did you know that there are less total deaths related to COVID in Singapore than there are students in our master? There are only 29 deaths and 59,879 cases. The lockdown was from April to June, in which all retail outlets shut except supermarkets and pharmacies. The lockdown was divided into phases, as you can see here. Phase 1 occurred in June. It was the reopening of elementary schools and some workplaces. Phase 2 happened in July with a broader reopening of social and economic activities. Finally, Phase 3 began in January. Activity resumed with limited crowd size to prevent large clusters.
Singapore was proactive and reacted very early to the pandemic, taking it very seriously in order to minimize the consequences and have the virus under control. The country has a reputation of being extremely safe and strict, which is the way they reacted to the pandemic. They immediately closed the border to travelers, began testing aggressively, and offered a clear public communication strategy. They immediately scaled up laboratory capacity for mass testing and began developing their own test kit in order to not overwhelm hospitals. The government quickly put in place tech solutions that can trace patients' contact to minimize the spread. In mid-March, Singapore launched Trace Together, an application that uses Bluetooth technology to record the distance between users and the duration of their encounters. 42% of the population has downloaded. The government also encouraged the citizens to denounce inappropriate behavior on a specific application called One Service App. On the economic front, Singapore offered important fiscal support of almost 100 billion Singapore dollars to help hard-hit sectors such as airlines, construction, and tourism. The government also rolled out a stimulus package in April to support the local employees and business owners during the COVID-19 epidemic. This included funding employee salaries or providing flexible rentals payments and loans for up to 12 months.
During the lockdown, all shops, restaurants, and malls were closed. Only essential services like embassies and hospitals were open, and of course, masks were compulsory. Takeout was offered by restaurants that chose to stay open. However, these restaurants were policed. You weren't allowed to loiter outside, and they had to follow new guidelines for food handling, and everything had to be disposed of at the end of the day to avoid any contamination, so it was potentially expensive to stay open if you couldn't sell. All restaurants and furniture shops are now open since the end of June. The conditions are limited capacity, 8 people per table for restaurants, and mandatory masks and hand sanitizer. Temperature checks before entering furniture shops or restaurants, and finally modified hours. Shops and restaurants are open from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. and have either delivery or click and collect. In February 2020, the National Environment Agency rolled out the SG Clean program in retail, dining, and tourism sectors to ensure sanitization and hygiene in the business. It focuses on certifying establishments that adhere to the protocol. To be certified, businesses must comply with a 7-point checklist that varies according to the type of business. To date, more than 400 restaurants, cafes, and bars have attained the certification, along with more than 2,500 hawkers, markets, and coffee shops. Restaurants have stricter policies. The SG Clean inspectors visit weekly in order to renew the certification. Now moving on to examples of restaurants that innovated and adapted during the pandemic. First, we have the Tippling Club, an upscale restaurant that serves gastronomic food, one of the best in Asia. The chef and owner decided to adapt his innovative and complex dishes to more casual dishes, comfort food that would survive cardboard delivery boxes, and also comfort Singaporeans' cravings. They advertised it on Facebook, and overnight it became a success. They also began to think outside of the box and deliver cocktail kits, and also created alcoholic gummy bears, of which they sold 700 packs in 2 months. Some events that they organized included a virtual Zoom party where attendees received a bag including tequila, food, and t-shirts to their home, and learned how to make margaritas and played rounds of trivia. They also had several master classes such as sake tasting and truffle pairing. Through sponsorships, the restaurant managed to provide cheaper options to their customers, as their aim was not to make money but break even while ensuring that local people had fun. After reopening, the restaurant actually gained a new audience thanks to their online events and deliveries. The owner wanted to continue the Zoom events and online delivery platform, but it was too much work after opening again, so they decided to just open the restaurant and have a small online section for cocktail gummy bears. Another example is wet markets. Wet markets can be considered both grocery stores and restaurants, but we have decided to include this example as we found it very interesting. In Asia, wet markets are marketplaces that sell food and also have a space for customers to dine in. Wet markets are very traditional, at least before COVID they were. A Singaporean media agency wanted to digitalize wet market businesses to encourage seniors to stay home. In May 2020, for the first time, stalls from the popular Tekka market could hawk their fresh produce and meals over a live stream on Facebook. Customers were able to interact with the seller, ask them more about their items as they would in the actual market in the comments section of the Facebook live stream. Customers placed orders through the comment section and also confirmed their details via Facebook Messenger and made the payment via Pay Now. The produce and meals would be delivered to them within the day. According to the agency, the total views of the live stream session were more than 28,000. The vendors were overwhelmed by the response, and some stalls even received 1,000 visitors per session.
Moving on to IKEA. 2020 has been the hardest year for the company in Singapore in 40 years. They endured millions of losses in revenue, and as it was one of the top places visited by infectious cases, it was one of the first shops that had to close. The store had online delivery but suffered delays in shipping and logistics. There was, however, a large increase in sales of home office furniture, as well as some increase related to sleep and comfort as people stayed home. The company already had a developed AR app that customers could use to visualize furniture in their homes, which was an extremely helpful tool during COVID. IKEA still plans to open a smaller concept store in Singapore, which would be the first of its kind in the region. Castlery is another popular furniture retailer in Singapore and is only available online. The company has wanted to play with augmented reality for a while and launched their AR app during lockdown. The company believes that even after COVID will be over, consumers will shift towards a more low-touch experience, so AR brings a new customer experience and reduces the perceived risk of buying furniture as it is an investment. The app was costly to create, but increased conversions and boosted return on investment between 5 and 10%.
Now moving on to another great example of furniture retail that managed to adapt during COVID. The Great Singapore Sale is a yearly event during which shopping malls have bargains and deals for 1 month. During COVID, the event still took place, but online for the first time in 26 years. Nearly 400 brands were available on an online platform called GoSpree.sg. One could download discount coupons and use them for in-store purchases, play online games to win prizes like gift cards, or watch live streams on Facebook for exclusive deals. The GoSpree platform had more than 200,000 page views during the month-long event. Within the GSS, there was a virtual mall called the Furniture Centrum that replicated the look and layout of a real mall. The virtual furniture mall featured products from 28 local brands. Shoppers could move around and zoom in on furniture pieces by clicking their mouse and tapping their mobile phones. In an interview, one retail mentioned they had always wanted to try virtual reality, but were held back by the cost. They now know that it works and is successful and will invest in it in the near future. The founder of the Furniture Centrum mentioned that by putting all the stores together on one virtual reality platform, replicating the feeling of being in a mall, furniture stores managed to attract more prospects and not just customers who already know who they are. Let's compare Morocco and Singapore's restaurants. They both had existing food delivery platforms and opportunities to support local vendors. Morocco is more traditional and there are less smartphone and internet users than Singapore. Therefore, it is easier to have Singaporeans scan QR code menus and reach them online. Although Morocco has some food delivery services, it is not as widespread and used as in Singapore. During the pandemic, Moroccan restaurants focused mainly on survival as they didn't want to close permanently, whereas in Singapore, many restaurants focused on the changing consumer needs during the pandemic and adapted their menus, offerings, and prices. What was interesting to note is that in Morocco, companies who had technology and logistics such as Jumia thrived during COVID, whereas in Singapore, it was the companies that evolved technologically during COVID and not those that were pre-established that did well. Now the initiatives that we propose for restaurants in Morocco. We propose food packs, knowing that the technology is not yet too advanced and that restaurants are operating at 50% capacity, and added to the fact that Ramadan is coming up, we suggest that companies create food packs with discounts to get a drink and meal and a dessert to go. Packs would be advertised on street banners and people could call their restaurants to place the order and have the food delivered home. This is the more traditional omnichannel strategy that is adapted to the country. We also propose to create a more customer-centric experience. By creating food packs, restaurants should also try to be more customer-centric. For example, for every pack delivered, they can write a quote of the day, give out a discount coupon for the next order, which will also incentivize customers to purchase more often. Finally, we propose food trucks. Since restaurants cannot have their customers within establishments, we suggest companies invest in food trucks with their own banners on the outside. They will be able to set up some informal chairs and large tables in a public space and comply with country regulations. People could also collect their orders from the moving trucks and allow these to be a delivery service if needed.
The three main recommendations we would like to give to restaurants in Singapore are the following. First, innovate with technology. Think outside the box and use technology to connect emotionally with consumers, as they are all tech-savvy, so speak their language. Second, adapt to consumers. Adapt menu items and offerings to current consumers' needs. Third, leverage social media. It is an opportunity to reach more customers easily and grow exponentially.
Comparing Morocco and Singapore's furniture sectors, they both have lots of local vendors and less chains. The prices of chains are higher than in Europe, and COVID accelerated the use of technology in the industry. In Morocco, the furniture sector is traditional with lots of handmade artisanry, whereas in Singapore it's a mix of traditional and modern. In Morocco, some large chains established themselves in the last 5 to 10 years, whereas in Singapore it was in the last 20 to 25 years. As Morocco has a lower GDP per capita, buying furniture can be considered more of an investment, whereas in Singapore, it could be seen as less risky. Now looking at initiatives for furniture shops in Morocco. First of all, we'd like to enable omnichannel sales over the phone. Similarly to food packs, we suggest that local artisans are able to showcase their products on street banners. Each item would have a reference number on display in order to better identify the selected items. The shop's phone number would also be available for people to call and place their orders from the street, which leads to our next step, partner with colleagues. Once the order is confirmed, we suggest the artisans partner with colleagues for furniture delivery, since Jumia's pricing is unaffordable for small businesses. Colleagues is a direct competitor of Jumia. However, Jumia hasn't yet entered the furniture market, which would be a competitive advantage for colleagues to take over the artisan's niche. Then we have social media. Word of mouth is still the primary source of recommendation when it comes to buying furniture in Morocco. We recommend artisans to be more present on social media.
The initiatives that we are recommending to Singapore in the furniture industry are the following. First, to have integrated platforms, which will allow a seamless payment process, making the experience more enjoyable. Secondly, using a mix of augmented and virtual reality in-store and online to create a seamless omnichannel experience. Lastly, radio frequency identification technology. This will allow chips near furniture that connect with customers' phones to provide all the information about the object and less physical contact in the store for safety.
We would like to share with you Class Olson as a best practice in the industry. The brand has won several awards, including Best Omnichannel Retail Experience. The brand uses onboard technology and delivers a series of fully integrated touchpoints. For example, there are big screens with catalogs in the windows of stores that move as you pass by to grab your attention. They function 24/7, and customers can scan a code in order to see what they want on their phones without even having to enter the store. If they enter the store, they can scan any product and receive all the information, as well as save anything they like. On behalf of Team D, thank you very much for watching our presentation. We hope you enjoyed it and found it insightful. What was the impact COVID had on your local furniture business or store?
عندنا الكراء ولا مصاريف ديال الكراء ولا المصاريف ديال الدراري كما قلت لك.
Do people still come to your store and make orders?
انا حالي اللي ما حال ولكن الكليم عم نخبره ما كاينش كتقول لي عاد نقول لك كاين كوفيد
كيخاف باش يجي ولا شنو كاين؟
ماشي تيخاف باش يجي يعني الكليان تيقول لي عذب ليه حتى يجي تدي مع جميع الاحتياطات بالنسبه كنت تدير الكمامه وكدير بزاف ديال المسائل اللي هما يعني للضروره وانما الكليان كتجي تيجي حتى عندك تيسولك على الثمن، تيقول ليه هاد البياسه هذه كتسوى 2500 درهم، يعني كتنزل 20% ان باش تاخذ مع الكليان. في الاخر تيقول لك لا، تيقول لك بزاف عليا السلعه، كاين الثمن في الساعه ويعني الطلب كاين والعرض ما كاين.
With the current pandemic situation, how is it going for your business?
راه 9 شهور حنا في 9 شهور حنا في والكرا عندنا الكرا غالي، والخدام راه خصنا نعطي الخدام، واخا هو تحسب عليك الخدام بلا راه
الخدام اللي كانوا عندكم قبل كورونا باقي كاينين ولا
كيجي الخدامه اللي عندنا حنا على قد الحال، حنا بحال موقفين
كلشي باقي هنا ولا كيمشاو؟
باقيين جوج الناس باقيين خدامين معنا، مره كندهنوا معاهم. ما شاء الله 9 شهور حنا سادين ما خدامين. والكرا عندنا الكرا غالي، عندنا مصاريف، امر الله هو.
What do you expect in the upcoming months? Are you planning to change anything?
على حسب، ما نقدرش نقول لك ساعه جديده، على حسب الكليان شوف كيفاش غيكون من هنا لقدام ما عرفناش.
واش الكليان كي بغيتي تجيبو زعما كليان جداد؟
احنا الكليان على حسب ما خرجنا مع السوق، يعني ما عندناش اختيار في الكليان اللي هي تدخل مع غرض هذه من جهه، يعني باش انت مخير ماشي مسير ماشي مخير، كاين اللي جا خصك تخدم معاه، ماشي يعني بالضروره تخدم مع الكليان اللي هو كتصور انت في العقل ديالك اللي جا كتخدم مع غرض، بحال تخدم مع الدرويش. اما الكاين اللي كبر ما كيوصلناش، كيجي الدرويش اللي بغى طبيله، اللي بغى سديدرات، اللي بغى بلاكار، يبغى كوزينه، بحال هكا، يعني شي حاجه ديال الكرو ما عندناش.
What do you think of the vaccine? Do you think that it will help the COVID situation and in turn your furniture business?
عند الله، هادشي امر الله يتصرف، ما قلناش زعما شي حاجه، والله هادشي ديال الله. ما
زعما الناس اللي يخدموا
هادشي قال الناس لا
يشريو فهمتيني،
قال الناس الا دابا كان غادي تحل كل شيء، غادي ترجع للقضيه كيف كانت، والله اعلم. عند الله
ان شاء الله.
نطلب الله التيسير.